we've discovered that talking about the ways that God created us and wired us and celebrating those differences rather than trying to make each other more like us, we celebrate the opposite ways that we are created. We celebrate the ways that God has wired and designed us differently and learn to work together rather than seeing those differences as a detriment to our relationship. We see that as a help to our relationship. Hi, my name is Laura Perry Smalts, and I am a former transgender, and I'm an author and speaker, and now co-founder with my husband of a nonprofit organization called Eden's Redemption. And our goal really is to teach and equip the church on how to talk about biblical gender and sexuality. The reason I got into this ministry is because I lived as transgender for about 9 years, and I was raised in a Christian home. We were there kind of every time the door was open, and really believed a lot of lies. When I was a little child, from 5, 8 years old, can remember being very jealous of boys, wishing that God had made me a boy, angry at God for making me a girl. And throughout my life, really lived in almost this fantasy world. I would write stories about being a boy. I'd play video games as a boy character, and no one knew how much I was struggling inside. But really, as I got into my teenage years, is where things began to take a darker turn. I was looking for love in all the wrong places. I was angry at God. I told God I would never serve him again, wanted to be the opposite of a Christian, wanted to really run away from the faith. And as a result, I started looking for love in sexual relationships. And I didn't understand. I thought God just didn't want me to have fun, but God was trying to protect me. And so I used to blame men because I was used and abused and rejected and dumped over and over and over again. And I found myself in so many bad situations because I would tell them, no strings attached, and I'm willing to do whatever you want. But then I would be so hurt and used and abused in ways that I never even had imagined. And I found myself in so many dangerous places. And I felt so devalued, like I had no worth or value as a woman. And the Lord gave me an analogy this summer as my husband and I were doing a garage sale. And at the end of the day, there was a bunch of junk that we just wanted to get rid of. And it's like, if nobody takes it, we're going to throw it away. It's not even worth donating. And so we put a table out there with a big sign that said free. And the Lord reminded me that things that are given away for free are declared to have no value. And so that's what I was doing, even though it doesn't excuse what was done to me. But I was the one telling them that I had no worth or value. I didn't understand the profound value of human life, of the way that God created me in his image, to bear his image and to glorify him. And the Bible talks about how our body is intended to glorify God, is intended to be a temple for the Holy Spirit. In fact, body, actually, the Hebrew word for body is basar. It actually means to bear good news. The very reason for our body is to give us a vehicle to glorify God and to declare his goodness. And of course, I was using my body in all the wrong ways. And as I was in these relationships, always looking for, I would tell men that this is just casual, but inside I was dying. Inside I was longing to be loved. And I was always hoping that one of them would want me. And finally, after several years of being in these casual relationships and deep in a pornography addiction, one of them finally did it, and it was the worst relationship of my entire life. I ended up with a man that was a severe alcoholic, and I was just walking on eggshells all the time and so afraid and living in this constant state of fear, really feeling like I had no worth. And I believed this lie, that I would never be good enough to be a wife, that no one was ever going to want me, to be committed to me. And so I hated being in this relationship, but at the same time, I didn't want to leave because I longed for that security. And so I thought, well, this is better than being alone. But I began to think, the reason this never works out, the reason I'm never happy is because I was supposed to be the man. If I was the man, I know how to treat a woman. And so I began to fantasize about really reversing those roles. And what if I could be a man and have a woman that I could treat well and romance and show her how beautiful and treasured she is. So that's what really fueled that desire to become transgender. I had those thoughts and feelings a lot as a child, But after all the damage that the sexual relationships did to my identity and my self-worth, I just didn't even know who I was. And so it was like I wanted to reinvent myself. But through years of living that lifestyle, I realized how fake it all was. I realized that it didn't solve any of my problems. I didn't actually become a man, and I realized that I physically couldn't become a man. None of those surgeries made me any more of a man than I'd been before, just because I had the appearance of a man, and there were people that believed I was a man. But I began to realize that there was something different about men and women. I didn't understand it at the time, but there was something intangible that I couldn't even put my finger on, that I just knew I was not ever going to be a man. And I began to question, what does it even mean to be a man or a woman? I had never really asked myself that. Thankfully, the Lord was really pursuing me during that time. God began to display his goodness and his glory to me. And as God began to reveal himself to me, I began to see that after all I had done and all the sin I'd been in, and I just felt like the worst person, I felt like the chief of sinners. And I realized that God wasn't done with me yet, that he still wanted me after all of that, after all of my sexual sin and feeling like, the woman caught in adultery. There were no accusers. It's like Jesus wiped it all away. I gave my life to him and he cleansed me. And I remember feeling like I had this brand new chance at life, filled with the Spirit of God and so transformed, so radically saved and feeling brand new. And at first, though, I thought I was going to be a man of God, because I knew this wasn't God's will. But I thought, I've done too much. I've made all these changes. I know this wasn't God's will, but there's no way back now. But God began to draw me out of that lifestyle. And he began to speak to me and draw my heart and show me that he created me as a woman for his plan and his purpose. Just like the Bible talks about in Isaiah 29, shall what is formed say to the one who has formed it, why have you made me this way? When we live as transgender or some other identity, some other sexual or gender identity, we're declaring that we know better as God than God, and we're really declaring ourselves to be creator, rather than saying, God, I may not understand it all now, but I choose to identify with how you created me. I choose to agree with you that how you created me was good. Because God said that all of his creation was good, but then as he made human beings in his image and made them male and female, he said that was very good. And in this brokenness of this world, we're in a world cursed by sin. Our bodies are under the curse of sin. And there's a lot of brokenness and shame in this world. But God created us for a world that would have had no war, no sin, no disease, none of these things that we experience in this brokenness. And one day, God ultimately will restore all things. And those who belong to Christ will be a part of this new heaven and new earth, where we will not experience the shame and brokenness of our bodies and the awkwardness and the things we hate about our bodies and the things we hate about our identities. And we will begin to understand fully, as 1 Corinthians talks about, how we see in part now as looking through a dark mirror where it's kind of fuzzy and we can't quite understand, but yet we will fully understand one day. But then as I came out of that lifestyle, really, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I didn't think I'd ever feel like a girl again. I didn't think I'd ever look like a girl again. But as God began to draw me out of that lifestyle, he began to give me a love for how he designed male and female. And then as I did, God gave me a vision of traveling around the country and talking with a husband about these things. And so about a year after that, God brought this incredible man into my life. And honestly, I was so blown away by this man. I thought there's no way this man's going to be interested in me. And when he was, it was really hard to believe, because I didn't believe that God would have had such an incredible gift for me, and the man that I would like so much and want to be with, because I'd always been with guys that I didn't like very much. I'd always settled for guys that didn't treat me well. And so this was an incredible thing for me. But as we started dating, it brought out a lot of insecurity, because I had so much trauma from all the bad sexual relationships I'd been in. And at one point he said, have I not shown you that I desire you? Have I not shown you that I love you, that I want to be with you? And I realized that I had to stop looking at him through the lens of the men in my past, that he was not those men. And God had brought this incredible, godly, loving man into my life. And this is what God wanted for me all along. And honestly, if I had known this man was in my future, I didn't meet him until I was 39. I would have waited 20 years for him. This man was worth waiting for, to wait on God's plan for me, because the sexual sin that I was in before was never satisfying. It only brought destruction. It always left me feeling empty and alone and ashamed, and never had the security and the love I was longing for. But I discovered as God brought us together, and we eventually got married in May of 2022, and I realized that God had this incredible plan for marriage that I'd never understood. All I had known was sexual sin and sex outside of marriage. But the intimacy that God intended in marriage is so far beyond what I ever imagined, so much better than I ever could have dreamed possible. And such a different feeling. Instead of feeling ashamed and dirty, feeling like this brings us closer together, like God blesses this and this glorifies God. And so that has been an incredible discovery. And then because God has given us such a love of male and female design, we've discovered that talking about the ways that God created us and wired us, and celebrating those differences rather than trying to make each other more like us, we celebrate the opposite ways that we are created. We celebrate the ways that God has wired and designed us differently, and learn to work together rather than seeing those differences as a detriment to our relationship. We see that as a help to our relationship. And so that's one of the things that we study a lot. There's lots of great books out there that talk about male and female design. So I'd highly recommend a study on that, and really believing God and agreeing with God that His design, despite all the brokenness in this world, we're under the curse of sin, but despite all of that, God's design for male and female is good, and it's necessary for the stability of our relationship and for the stability of our family, because our kids desperately need to see that both male and female are good, and that male and female can work together in harmony for the glory of God and for the plan and purpose for which He's created us for it. Yeah, and I just want to encourage anyone who's out there who maybe your marriage is not going well right now. Maybe there's been a lot of trials, and one of the best encouragements I have, first of all, is to pursue the Lord with all your heart, mind, and soul, and let the Lord fulfill you. And as He does, the Lord will help you to be able to relate to your spouse better, to understand your spouse better, to understand what they're going through. And as you allow the Lord to work on you, the Lord will work on your spouse. Because I think so often we want to change the other person, but allow God to humble you and allow God to show you where you need to improve, on things you need to change. And I think as you do, and really as you study male and female design, as you understand the way that God has wired us differently, ask God how you can celebrate that, how you can embrace that. And instead of trying to make your spouse more like you, allow the Lord to make you more and more into the image of Jesus. And as you do, that is going to be such an incredible testimony and a witness and a beautiful picture to your spouse. And that will draw them to Jesus, and then ultimately the two of you back together. And if you found this content helpful, if you've enjoyed this video, please check out the links in the description below. Focus on the Family has some great videos and other resources for you that you will find very helpful. Also, check out the ministry my husband and I have started at edensredemption.org. Follow us on Facebook and other social media. We are just really getting started, but we are planning on creating a lot of great content. And one of the things that I hear so often is that there's not a lot of resources out there. I promise you there are lots of resources out there. So one of our goals is to kind of help people find those resources and connect to those resources. So reach out to us there. But please connect with Focus on the Family. They have so much great content. Like and subscribe here to those videos. And please share this video with someone else that needs to hear this.